Good evening, everyone. This is Gus Sentementes. I'm the senior correspondent with cityexplainer.com, and we have a bunch of people watching online. Welcome to tonight's live webcast of the Democratic Mayoral Candidate Forum. It's been hosted and organized by the Baltimore League of Women Voters, and it's being held in South Baltimore at the National Federation of the Blind headquarters. It's the national headquarters of this really important nonprofit. So there'll probably be about a couple hundred people in the room. I believe there are about 10 or 12 candidates who will be on the days tonight, and including former Mayor Sheila Dixon, who the last poll is the front runner. And I'll actually show you, unfortunately, we don't have really any current polls at the moment. This poll that I'm about to show you was done a couple in January. But as you can see, Dixon is the front runner there. Hey, Josh Harris, how you doing, buddy? How you doing? Yeah, good, man. I'm testing everything out here. Yeah, so hey, why don't you say hi to the audience here? This is Josh Harris.
Do I look here? Yeah. How's everyone doing out there?
And tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your party?
Well, I am a Green Party candidate for mayor, looking to really create sustainable change in Baltimore City. There's a lot of issues that haven't been addressed, and I think that Baltimore needs a candidate and someone who's unafraid to go against the grain, regardless of party affiliation, and do what's right. I'm not afraid to take risk and really step out there and do what's right.
Now, I know tonight is a forum for Democratic candidates, and why did you decide to come tonight?
Well, I'm here. We're all in this to make Baltimore a better place. So I'm just going to hang out, talk to some voters, listen, and maybe participate. Maybe I'll ask a question or two.
Now, one of the things, one of your challengers, Elizabeth Embry, I think today called for more forums that are more focused on specific topics. You've probably attended a lot of forums in the last month or two in the city, and I've attended several of them myself, and I end up finding that there's a lot of candidates. Not everybody gets just a small amount of time covering a lot of ground. Would you be supportive of more issue-oriented forums to talk about things like public safety, education?
Well, I think that several of the forums have been isolated to certain issues because the organizations that host them are concerned with certain issues. And so I've done environmental ones, I've done public safety ones, we have an education one next week. And so they are in that format. They do tend to try to cover all of the issues or as many issues as possible. So could we use more? Yes. But at the same time, I think we need to have greater capacity, because this is also a learning experience for the constituents, and so to really understand what's happening in the city and how policy works and how it impacts their daily lives. And so we need to make sure that at each forum we have as many voters or as many constituents in the room to really hear all of their options and how their city has been functioning.
Joshua, thank you very much for stopping by, and good luck. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. All right. Hold on. So where were we? We were talking about the latest survey. This is the Gonzalez poll here, and from January 20th. And as you can see, Sheila Dixon was in the lead, and Catherine Pugh, Carl Stokes, Councilman Nick Mosby, Elizabeth Embry, Warnock, and someone else. Now, what's interesting here is this survey was done back in January, and this was before Deray McKesson entered the race. Deray McKesson, as some of you may know, is vaulted into the national spotlight with the Black Lives Matter movement. He's a Baltimore, born and raised person who worked for many years in teaching, and he's now running for mayor, and he's sort of the wild card in this race right now. Where we're waiting to see what the polls, what Baltimoreans think of Deray. and we're also interested to see how much money he's going to be able to raise, because he's it's unclear to me if he's drawing how much money he's drawing locally from Baltimore, the Baltimore metro area, Maryland, but it's clear that he's able to draw from a national audience. And he's has a national spotlight. He's been on all the talk shows and news programs and all that, obviously. So that adds an interesting wrinkle to the race. Actually, I'm really excited because I actually have Luke Broadwater here. Luke Broadwater is a reporter for The Sun, covers City Hall, politics, election, and this is a coup for CityExplainer.com. This is awesome. So I'm gonna give Luke his proper. I even made a fancy graphical title for him. I just gotta find it here, and so to give him proper credit here, and. All right, so Luke, thank you for joining us. We're going to do this really quickly. What's the latest in election coverage news this week to come out of Baltimore?
Well, I think everyone's waiting to see the next poll that comes out. I think that we could have a significant bump from perhaps David Warnock with all the television ads he's running. That remains to be seen. And really there's a lot of vying between Miss Dixon and Miss Pugh for that top spot. Dixon obviously has had some financial questions, as had Miss Pugh. So we'll see how that all shakes out.
Where do you think Deray is going to land in this mix? Because he's obviously drawing from a national donor base, and do you think we might see some surprises there?
Sure. Well, Deray has about $160,000 raised already, which puts him in contention with about Carl Stokes' level. He obviously has a great national following, and but the big question and the conventional wisdom around him is, does he have any real support in Baltimore? And that's a question I think the first poll will show that he's in. The conventional wisdom is he will not fare that well, but who knows? Maybe he'll surprise people.
Yeah, and a note on television advertising, because we have several candidates now who've raised well into the six figures, and everyone's talking about David Warnock's TV ads and web video ads and Senator Pugh's video ads. We're seeing in the national presidential race that television ads haven't had a lot of impact. I mean, Jeb Bush spent a ton of money. I mean, he made a lot of video producers kind of put their kids through college, basically. And like, does anyone really think Baltimoreans at this point will be swayed by television ads when there's so much other media out there that they're being swayed by?
Yeah, I mean, the Jeb Bush model that you talked about is really was disastrous. I mean, if you could charge people with campaign malpractice, you could charge it in that campaign, right? So, but I do think there's a lot of evidence that successful, well placed, smart television ads are very successful in campaigns, and are David Warnock's that smart and successful? We'll see. Elizabeth Embry's been up on TV. Catherine Pugh's been up on TV. We haven't seen Nick Mosby or Sheila Dixon up on TV. Sheila Dixon actually has been running really effective radio ads featuring Jamal Bryant's father, who's very, very well respected throughout Baltimore. So, there's different tactics that people are using, and we're about to see how this race is shaken up in the past 2 months.
All right, so we've got 2 months to go here. What I really want to know is, how many candidate forums have you attended already, Luke?
Well, I think this is 6 for me. These guys, that's not too many. These guys have been doing 4. I think I've done over more than 40 by now. Okay. I've been trying to get to about 1 a week since the new year.
Have you ever watched a City Explainer webcast?
Yes, I have. In fact, the last forum I could not attend, and I wrote it off of your webcast. Wow, cool. And full disclosure, Gus and I are old colleagues at the Sun. So.
Yes, we used to work together. Yep.
So I'd like to be supportive of you, and I think it's just great work that you guys are doing.
Thank you very much, Luke. Have a good night. And are you writing a story for tomorrow?
Yeah, I am. So
great. Check it out, BaltimoreSun.com. Thank you all. We're going to go live.
at the end of it.
Right.
Where'd you go? That's what I'm wondering. Your face was great. You were like, what just happened? And then she was like, I think it was the bathroom. And you're like, what happened?
Hey, Sheila, how you doing?
Hey. You were really serious. Your face was like serious.
Hey, Sheila. Hey, dear. How you doing? Dixon. How are you?
Your face was like, I don't even know where I am.
Well,
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Is Senator... We're waiting for Senator Pugh. Anyone seen Catherine Pugh? There's someone alleging to be Senator Pugh, but he's not. I don't know where she is.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, good. Want to make sure some people are awake. Welcome to the National Federation of the Blind Jernigan Institute. My name is Mark Riccobono. I'm president of the National Federation of the Blind. And I'd like to welcome you tonight to this mayoral debate. It's a pleasure for us to host this event. The National Federation of the Blind is a nationwide civil rights organization of blind people. And we work on raising expectations for blind people because we recognize that low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. And we know that blindness does not hold us back and that we can live the lives we want. And so we train blind people, we empower blind people to be active in all aspects of society. And as a individual who's elected by a constituency, I know the great honor of serving as a representative leader. In my case, I serve as president of the National Federation of the Blind, having been elected at our national convention. We believe in the political process. We believe in the process of having people talk about what their hopes and dreams are and having people be able to ask questions. I was just telling some of the candidates that the National Federation of the Blind is a nationwide organization. We made this our national headquarters in 1978. We started investing in Baltimore by buying this entire city square block for $532,000. Sounds like a great investment, right?
I would say.
Well, we've put many, many more millions of dollars into this city square block, and we have 75 employees here now, and we're here to stay. This is our national headquarters, and we bring thousands of people through Baltimore from all over the nation and all over the world to learn about what we do on a nationwide basis. And we're very proud to be located here in South Baltimore, and we're very proud to be part of the fabric of society here in Baltimore, and that we've been so welcome. So we welcome you to our home, and we look forward to this evening's events. I do want to recognize this evening, first of all, our moderator for the evening, Tom Hall from WYPR. Thank you, Tom, for being here. And I want to extend our appreciation to the 6 neighborhood associations that have partnered on this event this evening: the Federal Hill Neighborhood Association, the Federal Hill South Neighborhood Association, the Key Highway Community Association, the Locust Point Civic Association, the Riverside Neighborhood, where we are right here, and my very own neighborhood, the South Baltimore Neighborhood Association. So thank you for all of our community leaders who are here. We also appreciate the League of Women Voters, who has partnered with us on this event this evening. Absolutely. Absolutely. The League of Women Voters of Baltimore City has done a great job helping us put this together. And I want now to turn the floor over to our representative there. I was asking her about her title. Her title is co-president. I said, I've never heard of a co-president. She said, well, you know, when you're a volunteer and you do as much work as we do, you got to have a co-president. I appreciate that very much, and certainly appreciate that she puts all of this work to raise civic appreciation and participation as a volunteer. Here's the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Baltimore City, Linda Riddleman.
Thanks, Mark. I'm gonna read you the rules for this evening, but before I do, I want to point out that we have a registration table in the back there where you can register to vote. I assume most of you, or not all of you, are. And to remind you that the felony voter law was overridden and takes effect March 10th. We worked very hard on that, thank you. So if you're so inclined, we'd be happy to register you to vote this evening, and we'll hang on to that registration, and I'll walk them down to the Baltimore City Board of Elections myself on March 10th. Also to remind you that if you need to change your address, we can do that tonight. If you need to change your party affiliation so you can vote April 26th, we can do that tonight. Maryland is a closed primary state. You can only vote in the Republican or Democratic race that you are registered for. So if you wish to change that affiliation so you can vote for somebody other than the judges, we can take care of that for you tonight. You can always change back after. The rules for this evening, and Tom's going to follow up with some moderation notes he has. Please, first of all, turn off your cell phones, or at least silence them. No recording or flash photography is permitted. You can take still photos, that's fine. And I should point out that this event will be live streamed this evening thanks to cityexplainer.com and southbmore.com. So you can look for it afterwards. We thank them very much for their support. No campaign banners, signs, clothing, buttons, literature handouts, or other campaign paraphernalia are allowed in the building. We ask you that you refrain from applauding or in other ways demonstrating support or non-support for a candidate. There will be no audience reaction shots during the debate, although panning of the audience before and after the debate may be allowed. We have determined tonight's order of taking the first questions and their seating assignments by lot. We drew numbers. Oops. And I'll let Tom, the candidates will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves. They will have 90 seconds to respond to a question, and they will have 30 seconds rebuttal. I'll be at the table here performing the timekeeping where they can see me, and I'll let Tom describe the way the questions are going to run. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and welcome to everybody. Welcome to the candidates. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the folks here at the National Federation for the Blind for hosting us. Thanks for everybody who is joining us online. The questions that I will ask you, ladies and gentlemen, have been developed by the 6 neighborhood associations that are cooperating with the NFB and the League of Women Voters in this event. Plus, we will have some questions from members of the audience who will be filling out cards, and some have already done so. Those cards will be brought to me during the course of the proceedings, which we hope to conclude at about 8:45 or so. That's our target. As you can see on the stage, ladies and gentlemen, we have 11 candidates. We are expecting Senator Pugh shortly. So we are going to divide you into 2 groups. A first group of the first 6 candidates, and then the second group of the second 5 candidates. As Linda mentioned, those candidates in the order that they sit has been determined randomly by a drawing of straws backstage. Each of you will be have a chance to answer each question, but the way we'll do this is as follows. I will ask the first question of the first 6 candidates, and then we will have, and each of those candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. Then we will ask the second 5 candidates if they would like to respond as well and rebut anything they've heard any of the other candidates say for a period of 30 seconds. We'll go back to the original group, and if you have anything additional that you would like to say, you will also have 30 seconds. You are not required to respond and rebut every time, but if you'd like to, you'll be given the opportunity to do that. Each candidate will start with an opening statement. We did change things a little bit from what Linda just announced. We'll have you speak for 1 minute in your opening statement and 1 minute and 30 seconds in your closing statement. And we will ask again that your closing statement not reference anything that anyone has said this evening, but rather that you concentrate on your own candidacy and your own reasons for wanting to be the Democratic nominee for mayor. So we will begin with an opening statement from each candidate, and we will begin with Councilman Nick Mosby.
In 50 years, children from Cherry Hill to Reservoir Hill to right here in Federal Hill will have the opportunity of knowing exactly what we are as a city. This is a defining moment for our city, a defining moment to say that we will make our government accountable to taxpayers, that we will make our government accountable to driving better schools for our children, that we will make our government accountable to protecting the sanctity of our communities. This is a defining moment, a moment that we haven't had in a very long time. It's a time for us to connect the dots of the challenges that have plagued our city for far too long. And with my unique background of being born and raised, seeing the best, but also seeing the worst of this city, working through city government in the past 5 years and seeing the deficiencies, but not long enough to allow them to cloud my judgment, it is time for us to come together to drive a collective spirit for a better change of Baltimore. Please vote for me, Nick Mosby, Mosby for mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Our next speaker is Patrick Gutierrez. He's a former Bank of America Vice President and Operations Manager.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Gutierrez, and I'm running for mayor because, as the father of 2 young daughters, I want a better city for them and everyone who lives here. And like so many other people living here, I am fed up with the way our city has been run. We deserve better. The office of the mayor has the responsibility to set the example for how the entire city is going to be viewed. And previous mayors have set a very low bar. I want to raise that bar for all of us. As an operations manager, I specialized in turning around poor performing operations. And when I look over at City Hall, I see many of the same problems that I was hired to fix. Poor leadership and poor management of our employees, our processes, and our money have cost our city dearly. It's time to change that. It's time to start getting results. Please vote for me, Patrick Gutierrez, for mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Our next speaker is Cindy Walsh. She is an academic researcher.
Hello, everyone. My campaign is probably the most different of all the others. I have a vision. It's different. Currently, we have a master plan that sees Baltimore as an international economic zone with global corporate campuses, global corporate factories, and a center that's for the foreign rich. My vision is to rebuild the communities that exist for the people who are here, making them attractive enough to bring new citizens, and to keep the idea of an international zone away. We want to be a sovereign city, a state, and a sovereign nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Our next candidate is Deray McKesson. He's the co-founder of Campaign Zero.
I'm here tonight running to be the next mayor of Baltimore because I believe in the power and promise of the city. I grew up in the city, I love this city, and in that love, I also know the challenges of our city, like you. And if we're to meet those challenges head on, if we're to find a new way for the city, we have to take a new path. And if we don't, if the establishment is what we choose, if the familiar is who we choose, we know what we're gonna get because we're living in it. My name is Deray McKesson, and I'm not beholden to the establishment. I'm an activist, educator, and organizer who knows what it means to put forth a vision, to put the right people in the right place and follow that vision through to execution. I believe in a city that works for people, a city where students go to school in safe environments, where people have jobs, and they can support their families, and where the police serve, protect, and respect each citizen. Tonight's conversation has to be a conversation about concrete things that we can do to make people's lives better today and tomorrow. It has to be about real things and real solutions because people's lives hang in the balance. I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm ready to start this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. McKesson. Our next candidate is Calvin Young. He's an engineer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Calvin Young. It would be a privilege and an honor to serve you as the next mayor of Baltimore. Our city is in a state of emergency. We've recently had 344 homicides. We face a $75 million budget deficit, and over a quarter of our citizens live in poverty. When I walk the streets of Baltimore, it's clear to me, as it is to many, that we are in need of new, fresh leadership for the future of our city. I was born and raised in Northeast Baltimore to a mother who is a 22-year veteran of the city jails. I went to Poly, studied mechanical engineering at New York University before going to Harvard Business School and working at the White House. I've worked as the national chairperson also of the National Society of Black Engineers. So I've helped thousands of young people be excited and exposed to engineering. So education is very important to me. And the difference between me and other candidates is they'll talk about the past and ask why. And I'll ask you about the future and ask why not. Why not? Vote for me, Calvin Young, as your next mayor for Baltimore City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Our next candidate is Elizabeth Embry. She's the chief of the criminal division in the Maryland Attorney General's office.
Thank you. I'm proud of this city. It's a city where I grew up, where I went to public school, and where I spent my career. I've served as Deputy State's Attorney in the New York City Department of Housing, at the Maryland Department of Labor, and in City Hall. I'm now the chief of the criminal division at the Maryland Attorney General's office. So I've seen it all, inside and out, what works, what doesn't. I've witnessed what fuels progress, and also how easy it is for progress to stall without the right leadership. I'm running for mayor because we can do better. I'm running for mayor to end the violence, to make our schools stronger, and to expand our economy and hold our government accountable to the citizens of Baltimore. Every election is important, but this election in particular holds an opportunity for real change. I believe we can do things differently in the city. I believe we can be safe. I believe we can expand our economy. I believe we can have schools that serve our children, that serve all our children. And I believe that we can have an ethical and efficient government, because the alternative is unacceptable. The alternative is a government that is mired in corruption and waste and old politics. And the choice is clear. Elizabeth Embry for mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Embry. Our next candidate is Carl Stokes. He is on the Baltimore City Council.
Thank you to the National Federation of the Blind and the 6 communities who invited us this evening. I really appreciate that. I've come back to City Council in the last 5 years after being away from city politics for 15 years. And while I was out, I did start a school for boys. I'm a small business guy, but a nonprofit school for boys, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We're not doing a great job by our kids. I want to talk about that a little bit later in the day. When I came back, I was asked to vote on closing 15 rec centers, 6 pools, closing the hours of everything else. I asked why would we do that. They said we didn't have enough money. I went over to Rec and Parks. I said, let me see the books. Let me see the financials. Let me see your last 3 audits. They said, we don't do audits. We don't keep books. We don't do financials. Amazing. I put a law into the city council that said we have to audit the books of all our agencies, and that failed, but I came back, and now we're going to audit 13 of our agencies. I'll talk more about accountability and making sure that we determine where your dollars are efficiently. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Our next candidate is Gersham Cupid. He is a sergeant in the Baltimore City Police Department.
Good evening. How are you? My name is Gersham Cupid. I'm running for mayor because I care. Yesterday, my son died, and it was hard for me to come tonight, but my wife told me that I need to go and continue what I started. So I'm here tonight because I care. I care about Baltimore City. Like Patrick said, he wants a city where his kids can grow up and, you know, for it to be a better place. We have a lot of issues in Baltimore City, but we don't have a lot of people that actually care. I'm running because I care. The road seems hard, difficult, almost impossible. Whether I win or not, I will continue to fight because I care. My name is Gersham Cupid. I'm running for mayor of Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cupid, and we all extend to you and your family our heartfelt condolences.
Thanks, Tom.
Our next candidate is Wilton Wilson. He is a nurse practitioner.
Thank you. My name is Wilton Wilson. I'm from Jamaica. I moved to this city in 1997 to go to school at Johns Hopkins, which I accomplished a bachelor's degree in nursing and move on to get a nurse practitioner from Bowie State University. Since I came here, the idea is to just get the education and leave the city. But I fell in love with this city. And from that time to now, I noticed the city has been going downhill. And all I can see is the same politicians in power. And so we need to change the leadership in this city if we need to turn this city around. I strongly believe that this city is at risk to be run by the state. And I think that we are capable in this city to run this city. And we can't have the state take over this city. My name is Wilton Wilson. I'm running for mayor of this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our next candidate is David Warnock. He is the founder and CEO of Camden Partners.
I'm David Warnock, and I extend my condolences to a really good man.
Thanks, David.
It's the most important election of a generation. I have a plan for this city. I came to this city 33 years ago in that pickup truck that you see on TV. It's an inclusive plan where obstacles to one's potential do not get in the way of people achieving their lives' dreams. It's a plan where we end the culture of low expectations that has held this city back for too long. For 76 years, the NFB has raised expectations with people with disabilities over the whole country. We need a mayor and a city that does that for the people that live here. If you remember three things about me tonight, remember I'm about jobs and opportunity. I'm about real change, and I deliver on my promises. I will deliver on my promises to build an inclusive, prosperous Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Our next candidate is Sheila Dixon. She is the former mayor.
Thank you, and my prayers are with you and your family, Sergeant Cupid.
Thank you.
I was born and raised here in Baltimore. Some people think they know me, some people don't. But let me say this. As mayor of this city, I have been able to reduce the crime in over 30 years. I was able to get our agencies up and running and functioning in a manner that was professional, that provided quality service to really move this city forward. I'm proud because this area that we stand by is a development that my administration worked with the community to make this happen. And as we move forward, I raised my son and daughter in this city. I love this city. We have every ingredient to be successful in Baltimore, but it's how do we connect neighborhoods and communities to work together with city government. And the reason why I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm moving forward and staying very focused is because I have various plans that I have implemented that I'd like to share with you as we move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. So now we'll begin with our questions for the first 6 candidates. Again, these questions have been developed by the 6 neighborhood associations in this area, along with people from the National Federation for the Blind, with the cooperation of the League of Women Voters. Councilman Mosby, there are approximately 30,000 vacant properties in the city of Baltimore, about 16,000 houses and 14,000 or so vacant lots. What is your proposal to address this very serious health, economic, and public safety issue, and how will your plan be funded?
So 2 months ago, I released a plan called Connecting the Dots. It's a comprehensive plan that talks about the biggest challenges here facing the city of Baltimore. One we understand is blight in our community. And what we have to do is have a comprehensive plan for the city of Baltimore, not a plan that just looks out over 4 or 5 or 6 years, but a plan that really has objectable goals for the next 20 years. And that's by building off of our strengths. When I moved back to Baltimore from undergrad, I purchased a house that was dilapidated and abandoned for over 20 years. The houses across the street were in the same condition. But the reason I purchased there was because of Jordan Hill Park was my backyard. It had access to multimodal transportation and universities and to the central business district downtown. We have to start doing a better job of developing a comprehensive plan and building off of our strengths. We do that by lowering property taxes. We do that by providing tax abatement opportunities in some of our communities that have not seen investment. We do that by providing tax incentives in those communities as well. It's going to take a concerted effort and a collective effort, but there has to be a comprehensive plan. There has been a plan out there, Project 5000, to selling city-owned properties efficiently to now vacants to value. And a lot of times what we do is we take a scarcity of funds and we throw them around the entire city. What we need now more than ever is a way to develop a concerted effort where, again, we're building off our strengths through capital improvement plan money, through a consortium of developers, but really developing a true comprehensive plan that maps out the city of Baltimore, not just a plan that maps out a plan for 4 or 5 years.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez, your plan for vacants in the city of Baltimore.
To me, the vacants represent an excellent opportunity to do many things for the city. First and foremost is to remove the blight that has an effect on people who see that every single day, on their self-esteem, on their self-worth, and on their ability to live productive lives. We also have an opportunity to use that to put people to work. There are companies right now that have the ability to go into vacants and dismantle them and rebuild them back up. They are looking for staff. We have people all around the city who are eager to put in a good day's work. They just need the training, they need the tools, and they need someone to believe in them. So if we can find a way to pull those things together, which is going to be one of the main focuses of my plan on vacants, then we'll be able to start to not only address the problem of the blight, but put people to work at the same time. And by making sure that we have an efficient, competent, run city government, we're going to attract more people to stay here. That's going to result in more income taxes and more property tax revenue, which we can then use to fund programs like this. So the vacants, I don't see so much as a problem, I see it as an opportunity, and one that if we take full advantage of, we can use to our advantage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Walsh, your plan for vacant housing in Baltimore.
If your plan is to rebuild all of the surrounding communities, that will bring an attention to those vacant lots and houses. My plan is to go in. We're not going to outsource jobs. We're going to put the citizens who live in the communities busy with small jobs, doing the demolition, doing the debris recycling, doing the rehabbing of houses, so that they can live in those houses. So we're going to create the home ownership, we're going to create the small jobs, and we're going to create a local economy in each community. When you do that, you're going to create, as he said, a tax base that has been missing for so many decades. But I want to emphasize, when people say, how can you do that? Again, if you rebuild oversight and accountability, if you take a look at all of the kinds of contracts that the city has, the TIFs, the corporate subsidy, the enterprise zones and how they're used, you can add $1 billion or $2 billion to our budget a year, because there's that much that's missing that can be brought out to our communities, and I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. McKesson, your plan for vacant housing in Baltimore.
So I think about this in 4 buckets, and the first is understanding that one of the challenges with vacant renovations is that often the price of, when we renovate houses, that the cost of the renovation actually exceeds the value of the house once it's renovated. So some of that is making sure that we have a strategy to renovate blocks. We've seen that in the City Arts neighborhood in Greenmount, and that's one strategy that we've seen be really effective. When I think about the other parts, the second is making sure that we have an investment strategy that is focused just not on tear downs, but rebuild. So when we think about the governor's plan, it's a tear down strategy. It's not actually a rebuild strategy, and that is part of the work, making sure that we clear space, but it's not a rebuild. So part of the rebuild has to be about vacancy value and strengthening programs like that, making sure that we're intentional about partnerships. The resources exist in the city, the strategy doesn't exist. So how can we be intentional about building green space, building entertainment, and thinking about development beyond housing? And then the fourth bucket is thinking about development beyond the Inner Harbor. There are anchor institutions all across the city that we can develop around. The 21st Century Schools Plan, which is going to renovate every school building in our portfolio, will mean that renovation is going to come, or development is going to come to neighborhoods across the city, and we can actually bundle development there, especially when we think about vacant houses.
Thank you, Mr. McKesson. Mr. Young, your plan for vacant housing in Baltimore.
So when I think about vacants in Baltimore, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to prioritize which ones are going to have, what's going to happen to each one. So vacants should either be knocked down, they should be repurposed, or they should be reinvested in. So as mayor, one of the first things that I plan to do is do that for every vacant that's in the city, and every vacant lot, and every vacant home. For those that have to get knocked down, we use the funding that's been allotted and others to make that happen. But for those that that we should reinvest in, we should look for folks who want to start businesses and who are looking to come into the city to live, and we should help them to get those houses. For the places that should be repurposed, again, new businesses, but also other things like rec centers, and we can take blocks and convert them into places where kids can play, where we can do hydroponics, things like that, right here in an urban community like Baltimore. Other things that we can do, we can have tax incentives where we encourage folks who have been sitting on vacant lots and vacant homes for a long time to either invest or divest. So if your home is sitting there vacant, if you're living in Florida and you're just holding on to these properties, well, I'm going to skyrocket your property tax and then take the asset and repurpose it in a way that is beneficial for the city. Obviously, that's going to require some legislative assistance, but it can be done. With regards to funding for all of this, the reality is that the city budget is in a bad shape. We need to first and foremost do audits of our city government before we can know exactly where our resources are, and then make the decisions on how we're going to allot it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Ms. Embry, your plan for vacant housing in Baltimore.
Thank you. And it's important to remember that vacant housing not only destroys neighborhoods, but costs the city money on a daily basis, from police and fire to boarding up houses to crime and safety. There are 4 points that I'd like to make. The first is effective management. The city, since instituting vacants to values, which intellectually makes sense, has 500 more vacant houses than when it started. So we have to have a process that works and is turbocharged and driven with a sense of urgency, so that at the end of my term, we won't have 500 more vacant houses, we'll have thousands less. And that's about effective management. The second is increasing access to capital, and that's working with programs like Healthy Neighborhoods to make sure that instead of having $40 million in capital for renovation of houses, we have $100 million or $200 million, and that's working with banks and the private sector. The third is making sure that we're involving communities in the planning of their neighborhoods, and that means also giving them direct access to capital, bringing back the Dollar Home Program and the homesteading loan fund so that people have access to develop houses on their own. It also means involving communities by creating green space and having the ability to hold on to land through land trusts. Which brings me to the final point, which is preserving affordable housing. As neighborhoods develop, we need to make sure that there's housing for all. And that returns me to the idea of land trusts and other mechanisms to make sure that we have affordable housing in perpetuity so that everyone in this city benefits from the redevelopment of vacants, not just the lucky few. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Embry. Now, for the second set of candidates, would any of you care to respond for 30 seconds on the issue of vacant housing? And we'll take this in order. Mr. Stokes?
Sure. The other candidate made some great points. We need to make every house productive. There's a lot of vacant properties in Baltimore City that leads to crime. And in high crime areas, a lot of people do not want to invest. So, of course, our vacant issues is in line with all the issues we have in Baltimore City. But in all together, we need to make it productive, make it safe if it's unsafe, and collectively work with the communities to make it better in our communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, you care to comment?
Yes, I think we should revisit the current policy that they have on vacant houses, but I haven't heard anyone talking about rehab any of these houses for disability people. I've never heard that a part of the conversation. So I'm wondering here, when they talk about these invention capitals and all of this investment, where are the ordinary people fit into this? Where does the low-income people who wants to own a house fit into this? I not hear anyone talking about them, and they are the backbone of our city.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Warnock?
You know, we can put hundreds of people to work doing demolition, refurbishment, and recycling of our housing stock in Baltimore City. It takes about 125 people to take down and recycle 200 houses. We've got 16,000 vacant houses, and if you solve for X, that's 10,000. I started a company by the name of Green Job Works that's 40% owned by the Center for Urban Families and 60% owned by the management. We have 125 people doing demolition and recycling in Baltimore City. The solution is what I've been doing for a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Ms. Dixon?
Thank you. First, let me encourage people to go on my website and take a look at an extensive plan called Share Prosperity in Vibrant Neighborhoods. Actually, the Sun paper complimented that plan. But in that plan, it has a whole section about vacant properties, and it's through Land Bank. The city does not have thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, but we have property and we have land. And through a land bank that I studied for a number of years, it's working in Cleveland, it's working in Detroit, where we give you an individual or a developer.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. We'll now have the second question, which will be addressed to the second group of candidates. It concerns property taxes. The property tax rate in the city of Baltimore is more than double the rate of surrounding counties. Anne Arundel County is 2.3, Baltimore County 2.75, Baltimore City 5.6%. Why have we gotten to this point, and what do you propose to do about it? And then this question from a member of our audience: has anyone looked at converting from a property tax to a land value tax? Many economists believe that a land value tax will encourage development while decreasing taxes on residents and housing. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you. I do understand the land value tax. Currently, we'd have to change state law to go to that, but I do understand that you put the greater value on the land itself. So regardless of whether it's a vacant lot or whether it's a castle, you're going to pay the same amount of tax based on the land value as opposed to the improvement on the property. Having said that, I think my third or fourth bill coming back in the city council was a bill that said we would cut the Baltimore City property tax rate by 50% over the next 5 years. That bill was never heard by the city council. I wasn't even given the courtesy of it coming into committee to be spoken about. I believe, and I've said, and on my website, carlstokes2016.com, I speak to the fact that I would, as mayor, cut the property tax in Baltimore City by 50% over the next 5 to 8 years. And it's about a penny equals $3 million in this city. So 15 cents in the first year, for example, would be cutting the budget by $45 million. With the audits that I will be doing regularly, it is not a big deal on a $3 billion budget to find the first 15 cents to cut our property tax. It will spur development and investment in the city. It will spur new home ownership and new jobs by businesses being created and expanded. I absolutely will, in the first few months of my term, bring forward a plan to cut the property tax in half.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Mr. Cupid.
Yeah, Carl, that's assuming you win, right? But we're not there yet. But great point, audits. You know, we definitely need to conduct audits, find out where we're spending our money, okay? Once we fix our budget, then we can look on how we can reduce property taxes responsibly. In Baltimore City, we have a lot of issues, and finances is one of those issues we have. So while I'm committed to reducing property taxes as a whole, because I pay a hefty tax bill myself, I want to also ensure that we have good services in the city. The land value, the land value that you asked about, I haven't considered it myself, but what I am dedicated to is reducing taxes and making it more affordable to residents in the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cupid. Mr. Wilton? Mr. Wilson, excuse me.
Thank you. Before I came to this country, I was an accountant, and that gives me great pleasure to look into the tax and how it's being calculated in this city. And it's very interesting. You can't follow it at all. I'm like, what's going on here? But so I think that the easiest way to cut taxes in this city is to let everybody understand it very easily. I believe that we could cut taxes by reduce tax. You pay taxes every month. So you pay 11 and a half months for the first 2 years, and then 11 months for the next 2 years if I'm there for 4 years, and we see how that works. So in that way, you will get that tax break at least a month per year. So, you know, if you paid from January to November, you get December off. You can use that money for Christmas gift and all that. Now, to generate back the funds that we're going to lose from that 1 month, I propose that we increase taxes on parking in the city. If you live in the city and you can prove that you live in the city, it won't affect you who lived in the city, but people who visit the city. I think we should tax hotels, bedroom and boarding. We can increase taxes on that too to generate back taxes on that. Also, we could definitely increase the cost for illegal dumping and all of these other illegal things that they do that we can generate tax and be forceful on that. So I think that the best way to reduce tax is the way I think.
Mr. Warnock, your plan for property taxes.
Well, it's election season, and politicians will promise a lot of things, including big cuts in property taxes. The reality is that we've got to get a handle on our financing in Baltimore City. We need somebody that's got a business mind to take a look at what we're spending money on. I've been on audit committees, on many audit committees. If you look at what we're spending money on in Baltimore City, I mean, look at what Gregory Thornton found when he went to North Avenue. He went to North Avenue and found $3.6 million worth of annual expenses in ghost employees and spouses that weren't spouses on the health care plan. That's in the Baltimore Sun. And we haven't done an audit of our municipal functions since William Donald Schaefer was the mayor of this city. The little mini transportation audit that came out, a so-called audit, used words like guesstimate. And I know enough about GAAP accounting that is not a GAAP accounting term. That is not a GAAP accounting term. We need a business person, because if you look at the perversity of what's going on in our public schools right now, where the funding from Annapolis is going down, where property values are going up, because we simply got out-negotiated by a bunch of developers who got TIFs that allowed them not to pay taxes, but property values went up, and the cash that we got from Annapolis went down. We need someone with a business mind to handle this now.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Ms. Dixon?
Thank you. In my Shared Prosperity and Vibrant Neighborhoods plan, we have to be responsible when we reduce property tax. We need to do it annually, but we have to do it responsibly based on the fiscal layout of Baltimore City. For every penny that we reduce in the property tax, that's $100. So for 50 cents, it would be $170 million that we have to find annually. As I mentioned earlier, when we talked about vacant properties, so a land bank, when we can leverage properties to individuals or developers, and we remove those liens, then they will be able to leverage that to enhance and increase neighbors and communities, as well as the tax incentives. We have to balance the tax incentives. We have to balance it in neighborhoods that at this time are not getting access to that, so that we can attract development in additional communities. Because as we grow communities, we're able to grow additional revenue. Last but not least, the Horseshoe Casino. The reason why I supported the Horseshoe Casino was for two purposes. One, it was a new revenue source that was supposed to go for reducing the property tax, and two, for education. And currently, that's not happening. And with a new revenue source, it's an ideal way in order to reduce property tax.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Mr. Mosby, would you care to comment on property taxes?
Yes, I encourage the audience to go to my website, Mosby for Mayor, and read my tax reduction plan. I'm the only person on the stage that's put forth specific proposal on exactly how I'm going to cut taxes. The one thing when we talk about the comparison of Baltimore City taxes to our neighboring counties, it's comparing apples to oranges. Right now, in that tax rate, we have fees like the trash fee. I call on the city to develop and itemize and pulling it out so we can really compare apples to apples and rates to rates. We need to develop a tiered tax structure for our vacant and dilapidated homes. And lastly, we need to drive more governmental accountability to drive efficiency.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez, property taxes.
Yes, so in addition to looking at lowering property taxes, which is going to require a lot of work from a lot of people, as the mayor, I'm going to make sure to improve the value that we're getting for the high property taxes that we're paying. With that, as much as we're paying in property taxes, we should have neighborhoods that are clean. Our potholes should be fixed. We should have more trees planted in our neighborhood. We should have more well-lit streets. And we should have more quality after-school programs for our kids. That's what I will focus on, is improving the day-to-day management of our people, our money, and our processes to ensure that those things take place.
Ms. Walsh, do you care to comment on property taxes?
If you read the school bond issue, the AAA rating that was attached to it attaches to all of the city's tax revenue for decades, and that is written so vaguely that will mean property tax. And we're having a bond market collapse with the Fed rising rates, which means that those bonds and our taxes will be tied forever to that. There's no lowering it. I am about reviewing the bonds, seeing that they're written in public interest, and that is the only way we'll be able to be free of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. McKesson.
So we should consider an annual decrease in the property tax after we review the budget. One of the things that I've realized when I talk to so many people is that people feel like there's no investment on the property tax, that people are paying all this money and they aren't in safe neighborhoods, that kids don't go to safe schools. And that's what we need to address as well, is making sure there's a real reinvestment on the property tax, and also consider an annual decrease in the property tax after we review the budget itself.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Yeah, I'll reiterate my comment on the audits and how we have to focus on, fixing the budget first. But, I think we have an opportunity in this election to be very bold. There are a lot of people who have been in political office and have had the opportunity to make the changes that we have known we need to make for a very long time. We have too many candidates that are up here for us to go back to the same old policies, the same old people who are telling us the same old thing. And I'm hoping to give you guys a viable alternative, somebody who is authentic and someone who has real genuine interest and a business mind to be able to get the job done for Baltimore.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Ms. Embry, on property taxes.
Thank you. Our city is too heavily reliant on property tax revenue. It's not healthy for our city, and it makes us uncompetitive. But getting out of it means being fiscally responsible, disciplined, and predictable. And that means, as mayor, I will stay committed to the current mayor's committed reduction, and beyond that, I will commit and be disciplined in reducing property tax rates as we see increases in other sources of revenue, so that we change the balance in the city and so that we're not so heavily reliant on property tax revenue. But it requires discipline, it requires prosperity, and it requires commitment.
Thank you. We'll now move to another question. This is for the first group of candidates, and it concerns the issue of racial inequality. There are dramatic racial and socioeconomic disparities in our city. There are, in many ways, two Baltimores. One in which, for example, a child born in Sandtown, Winchester has a much lower life expectancy than a child born in Roland Park. As mayor, what will you do to address these disparities, and what specific policy initiatives do you propose to improve this situation? Mr. Mosby.
A lot of times we talk about the systemic and structural issues that plague our city when we talk about crime, when we talk about blight, when we talk about the school system. The one question that we do not do well with is going after poverty. And that's the single most root of all of the systemic issues that plague our city. Until we're able to drive equity into our communities, again, building off of strength. When we have folks that are living in East and West Baltimore who've purchased homes 20 and 30 years ago, and their property value is less today than it was when they purchased then, that's a problem. We know that from a working class and middle class family perspective, the single biggest investment a lot of times is your home. And the single biggest access to growth in capital and wealth is through your home. And the failed policies of the leaders of the past has contributed and exacerbated this issue throughout East and West Baltimore. Another problem that we have to really focus with in our communities is lead paint poisoning. The fact that in 2016 we have children in East and West Baltimore, hundreds of them, that are being plagued by lead paint poisoning on a yearly basis is a problem. These are the challenges that have plagued our city for far too long, and it's up to us to come together. That's why this election is so important. These things that we talk about over and over and over again that we've seen for far too long, it's time for us to really develop the plans and the challenges. That's why my comprehensive plan is a 15-point plan that really goes after those challenges, like lead paint poisoning, like developing early childhood educational opportunities, like getting to the root of these fundamental issues around poverty that directly drive our systemic issues in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Mr. Gutierrez, on the issue of racial inequality, what specific policy initiatives do you propose?
Yes, well, in many cases in this city, the difference between the haves and the have-nots comes down to access to quality resources. We have not done anywhere near the job we need to making sure that children across the city have access to the resources they need to succeed. One of the things we're going to do is expand pre-K and make it universal across the city. That's going to do two things. It's going to improve kindergarten readiness, and it's also going to diversify our classrooms, because we can't keep putting the poor black kids in one class all by themselves and expect them to do as well as the diverse classes that we see all across the city. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to rework the school curriculum completely to make sure that it meets the needs of today's children in our specific environment. The cookie-cutter academic approach is not working. We need to incorporate things like mental health and wellness, Because everybody might not grow up to be a scientist, but we want everybody to grow up to be healthy. We need character coaching. We need life skills training. And we're also going to expand vocational education training, but we are going to start it in the 6th grade. Because by the time children arrive to middle school, if the academic approach isn't working out for them currently, their only recourse is to drop out and head down a wrong path. We want to give them as many opportunities to participate in a productive society by earning a trade that they can use to raise their family and stay away from crime.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Walsh, on the issue of racial and socioeconomic disparities.
My platform is about removing the connection of every Baltimore City agency from two powerful institutions who control all of the development. People might not be aware, but every agency in our city is attached to a global corporation. If you're going to remove yourself from those corporate entities and rebuild those public agencies out into all of the communities, you are right there going to build that equity. If you are somebody who recognizes the federal equal protection, you are going to not only fight for those federal funds that are supposed to come to the state but often don't, you're going to get them here, you're going to see that they're distributed equally, whether it's education, whether it's health care, protecting our water from privatization because it's going to be the poor that are affected the most. Those are the kinds of things you want the city to have in place for every citizen. I am completely about rebuilding the public justice system in the city. We have none. We have no public justice system that looks at government corruption, at the criminal justice system and the injustice in criminal charges on citizens that need to be stopped and corrected in many cases. I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. McKesson, on the issue of racial and socioeconomic disparity.
So much of the work in these areas are not a matter of what to do, it's how do we do it at scale. When I think about 3 buckets, I think about so many of these disparities start at birth. So when we think about the 0 to 3 cohort, we can actually make a citywide strategy around Head Start, and 4 to 5 is a citywide strategy around pre-K, making sure that kids who need access have access to those services. We can do that. And then home visits are something that in the city we've seen have demonstrable results. We just haven't seen it at scale. And home visits are really important because we can address things like lead paint. We can make sure kids have their first libraries. We can get to child literacy. We can do that with the home visit strategy. And a job strategy is a second bucket, a job strategy that focuses on skill development and access to resources. So with skill development, in the city, upwards of 30% of adults are illiterate, and we have to address the adult illiteracy rate if we're ever gonna make a skill-based progress with relationship to jobs. And then the third is something I'm always fascinated about, this idea of health beyond hospitals. When so many people think about health, they think about people going to the hospital. But so much of what it means to be healthy is the stuff that you do every day. The hospitals are only a small part of what that means. So when we think about public health campaigns around HIV, around chronic illnesses, we can actually do that work. And those disparities are things that we've logged in communities. But again, so much of the way the public thinks about it and the policy thinks about health is centered on hospitals. And we can actually flip that script there in ways that we've seen be demonstrable in communities. And so much of it too is about how do we think about health, not just with people who access services in communities, but think about community health in a broader way, not just focused, again, on people who access services. And we've seen that work happen across the country, and we can do that here as well.
Thank you, Mr. McKesson. Mr. Young, on the issue of racial and socioeconomic disparity.
So this is a topic I get very excited to talk about, because when you talk about racial inequality, it's really, at the end of the day, social and definitely economic. It's definitely it definitely comes down to poverty at the end of the day. And in October, I wrote an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun where I spoke specifically about this topic. And when it comes to what we need to do, for me, I look at it in 2 different ways. Number one, it's education, and there are some really practical things that we can do to this very solvable problem. Number one, universal pre-kindergarten, so that kids can all start on the same field. Algebra by 7th grade, calculus by 11th. These are things that are possible. A lot of my background is with exposing kids to science and technology, doing summer camps where kids get excited and exposed to engineering. Give me $10 million and I will give you back 10,000 young people in our city who are interested, excited, and exposed to engineering, science, mathematics. You know, lead poison elimination in Baltimore is something that has to happen. Upwards of 5% of kids have elevated levels of lead paint in their bloodstream. And then on the second side, you know, when you're looking at, you know, job creation, small business growth has to happen in our city. 2/3 of all new net job growth come from small businesses. When we speak about you know, the ability for businesses to grow, if you look at C&I loans, commercial and industrial loans, you see that, you know, they haven't recovered since the recession. Those loans that are, especially those under $100,000, go to small businesses. And in places like Baltimore, where we have an outsized effect on job growth through small businesses, with, you know, things like microfinancing loans and creating incubators, we can really spur small business growth, especially in our poorest neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Ms. Embry, on the issue of racial inequality, how would you address those problems?
Thank you. The disparities in the city are staggering, and it has to be the top priority for the next mayor to change the life expectancy number you cited for whoever is the next mayor, and it certainly motivated me throughout my career. I want to talk about three things. The first is reducing barriers to employment, and that's literally reducing the barrier of not being able to get to your job, having a transportation system that works and connects the people in the city, 80% of whom in some neighborhoods do not have access to a car, to the jobs in the city and in the region. It means the city has to take a lead in saying, these are the workforce programs that work in industry and labor, and this is how we as a city are going to align our resources and the resources of labor and industry to make sure that we're investing in the right programs that connect people efficiently to jobs. And it also means having automatic expungement so that people aren't held back by records that make them unattractive to employers. The second piece is understanding and changing the systems that are oppressive to the poor. It's actually expensive to be poor in Baltimore, from our rent court, from our child support structure, from our cash bail system. We impose on the poor in so many ways and make their lives harder, and so you need someone who can understand and make real changes to the systems that hurt the poor in the city. And the final thing is investing in education, because we will never change these disparities unless we have a successful school system. And as mayor, I want to take a direct role in the school system and work in partnership and make our system work, not just for students like me who got to go to City or Calvin who got to go to Poly, but every student in the city of Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Embry. Now we'll have 30-second rebuttals from our candidates, beginning with Mr. Stokes.
Sure, if I would. Education and jobs. So Martin Luther King said economic equality was the great civil rights issue, not if we could sit next to one another at a lunch counter. 44% of black children in Baltimore live in poverty. 89% of our fourth graders are below reading and math proficiency. I started 2 great schools because I believe so strongly to change this, you have to do it in education, starting at the first grade. I, as mayor, I would redirect our efforts. I would take full accountability and responsibility for the Baltimore City public schools and make them work.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Mr. Cupid, on the issue of racial and socioeconomic inequality.
Right, so opportunity. A lot of parents are not involved in their kids' schoolwork. And we need to address the kind of education that we're giving our kids. By the time graduation comes, we have a lot of kids that have a juvenile record, and we need to address a lot of juveniles being arrested and obtaining records without education and being put back into a society where they don't have the education or skills to get a job. So we really need to address the education and the opportunity aspect of it.
Thank you, Mr. Cupid. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Pugh has joined us. Senator, welcome. You have 30 seconds to discuss the issue of racial inequality in the city of Baltimore.
Well, first, let me apologize for being late. We had a number of bills and things going on this session, but let me just say, I think we have to have some real discussions, because 18 to 24-year-olds, I don't care what your education level might be, are unemployed in this city at the rate of 37%. So it's not just about being poor. It's about having a discussion with our companies and corporations to say, we've got to equalize opportunity in this city, we've got to share wealth, and we've got to recognize that all of us working together can make a better city. And it is really us pulling together and providing those opportunities for everyone across the board.
Thank you, Ms. Pugh. Mr. Wilson.
Again, I want to make sure everyone who come in late to understand that I'm from Jamaica. It's a third world country. And when a candidate for president come to this city and said, our city looks like a third world country, it hurts me. Because I never come to the United States to a third world country. And because of this situation, is because of the current and past politicians. We need change. We need new people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Warnock, on the issue of racial and socioeconomic inequality.
Poverty is at the heart of racial inequality. The organizations that I have led or been involved with have literally employed thousands of people. The middle school that I started, Green Street Academy, is the most chosen middle school in the city. The Workforce Development Organization that I was the chairman of for 15 years, the Center for Urban Families, is one of the most effective workforce organizations in the city. President Obama came to visit us. I want to scale the things that I've been working on for years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you. 3 areas: education, expanding our community schools, as well as balancing across the board. A young person that goes to Roland Park versus a young person that goes to West Side. They should be equal in the services and the programs that they provide in creating that. Secondly, access to opportunities through business. Minorities hire people that look like them. If we expand our opportunities with minority and women-owned businesses, we will increase entrepreneurship within this city with resources.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. We're now going to move to another category of question. Before we do that, Senator Pugh, we'd like to give you an opportunity to take 60 seconds to introduce yourself and make an opening statement, as the other candidates had an opportunity to do before you got here.
First, let me just say thank you for the opportunity to be with you all. I love this city. I'm running to be the next mayor of this city because I see the glass as half full as opposed to half empty. I think there's a great opportunity in this city to bring us all together, to recognize that when we lift the least of us, we lift all of us, that if we focus on providing educational opportunities across the board, we'll have a greater city. If we create the jobs and the opportunities and include everyone in that process, we'll have a greater city. If we work together to provide opportunities to have the best education system, we'll be a greater city. And reducing crime is a part of all of us working together, police and community with police, and we'll have a great city. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Pugh. Mr. Stokes, our next category of question concerns people with disabilities. 1 in 5 Baltimore City residents has a disability. People with disabilities often experience educational barriers, a lack of accessible transportation, and a 75% unemployment rate. What would be your guiding principle when implementing policies that affect citizens of Baltimore with disabilities?
Well, I believe strongly that we should, first of all, be absolutely sure that all of us and all of those that we manage and direct clearly understand that we are not to be discriminatory in any way, but to even be more intentional in our actions for those who have disabilities. Again, going back to the school that I started, we made sure, not just in the issue of disability, but we did mental health services for all of our young people, that we had the social services for all of our young people, that we didn't make stigmas. And I think that happens too often, the issue of stigmatizing those who have some disability. I would be absolutely clear as the mayor of the city of Baltimore that we not only followed the law, but we went above such in our attitude and in our actions with those who have disabilities. And we made the right accommodations, that we think forward in terms of rebuilding, in terms of home, in terms of employment, and we are intentional in our actions that those who have disabilities are it's brought to bear that the services that we must deliver will deliver for them, will be equal to and greater than, in some cases, as needed across the board.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Mr. Cupid, your guiding principle when implementing policies that affect Baltimore citizens with disabilities.
Well, when you say my guiding principle, I think about what I first said, that I care. And when you understand that people who are disabled, that they can live a normal life also, it's to ensure that it happens regardless, no excuses, right? So we need to make sure that not only we have a policy, but that it's being followed. So in having that policy is staying connected with those organizations and communities and who are dealing with them on a daily basis, and to ensure that my policy lines up with their needs and the things that affects them directly. So that's my answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cupid. Ms. Pugh, your guiding principle concerning policies that affect people with disabilities.
Fairness and equality. Disability does not mean incapable. And so every opportunity should be provided that those who are disabled can achieve their highest objective. And that we should make sure that as they pay taxes and provide and opportunities are provided, that they get the same opportunities as everyone else in our society.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Your guiding principles in this matter.
As a practitioner, I deal with sick people, disabled people, people in need, mental health, anything that deals with a person who have to adjust to life because of some kind of illness. I think that the federal law has a good policy, but it's not being mandated. And so we need to have an advocate within the mayor's office, a section that deals specifically with disability, especially into the low-income area. That's where I mostly practice. And there's no extension to disabled people in the low-income community. I don't see it. Most of the time, I have to be the advocate for them. No one pay attention to that. They put disability to the side. They think most disabled people are non-productive. That's what I see every day. I'm not blaming anyone, but the rules are there, but it's not being implemented. And so as mayor of this city and see it every day, it would be a high priority, and I'll make sure that it's taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Warnock, your guiding principles for policies affecting the disabled.
It starts with equal treatment and fairness. You know, I love the way the National Federation talks about raising expectations, lifting the horizon for people. We need to do that in Baltimore. We suffer from a culture of low expectations in Baltimore across our great city. We need to fight that. We need to change that. Central to my administration will be ADA compliance on every level and going the extra mile. Central in my administration will be not only increasing the minimum wage, but making sure people with disabilities get paid the minimum wage and get paid a fair salary. Those are the things we're going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Ms. Dixon?
Thank you. My guiding principle would be to be inclusive of people with disabilities, to be a part of my administration throughout. And I can go example after example, not only with our Disability Commission, where we worked in partnership with the Federation for the Blind and many other organizations to make sure that as we deliver services to the citizens of Baltimore, that we deliver to services to everyone. And through that process, we will have talented individuals who are part of the disabled population who are sensitive to the needs of what needs to happen. And that would be a part of my team, and that's going to be part of the guiding principle.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Would anyone else care to rebut on this issue of disabilities? Mr. Mosby.
I think the guiding principle specific to our government is ensuring that there's transparency, accessibility, and inclusion in the decisions of Baltimore City government. I think, unfortunately, City Hall sometimes acts in a vacuum or a silo where we make the decisions for our communities and for our different demographics. What we need to do is drive a more inclusive relationships, specifically of those of the disability community, to ensure that we have cultural sensitivity things around all operations in city government.
Anyone else in Group 1? Mr. Gutierrez.
So inclusion and do the right thing are my guiding principles. They're a couple of the pillars of leadership that I practiced for more than a decade. There was a playground that was going to be built at my daughter's school 3 years back. They announced the plans for it. I advocated for that playground to be accessible to people with disabilities. I did not have the authority to make that happen, and unfortunately it did not happen. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for mayor, because I will use that authority to make sure that our city is inclusive for everyone.
Thank you. Ms. Walsh, your guiding principles.
If you're somebody that's going to enforce the Federal Disabilities Act, then all of the agencies within the city will be open. I'm going to stop the corporate school structures and go back to a public school structure that will honor the idea of special needs, for example. If you're going to take the corporate out of the infrastructure, you're going to then have a public agency that will respond to those federal protections of civil rights and disabilities.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. McKesson, on the subject of disabilities.
At a philosophical level, it's an understanding that everybody has gifts, skills, and talents, and our work is to make sure that we honor those no matter how they manifest. The three concrete things is one is strong anti-discrimination laws and policies, and that is clear at the government level. The
Mr. Gutierrez.
So when I first moved to Baltimore in 1999, Patterson Park was known as the place to go for drugs, prostitutes, and violent crime. And now it is one of the crown jewels of our city, with thriving neighborhoods all around it and several in-demand public schools. Our recreation budget is criminally underfunded. It would be a very high priority of mine to reverse that trend. Currently, only 1% of the city's budget is devoted towards the recreation. That is unacceptable. But it's not just about throwing more money at the problem. It's about making sure that the people in charge of our recreation department have clear, measurable expectations, and that they're held accountable to do the jobs that we're hiring them to do. That starts at the leadership level, and that's why I'm running for mayor, because I believe with better leadership from the top down, we will see a much better performance, not just in our rec and parks department, but across all city agencies, and that will result in a better Baltimore for us all. Someone told me a story the other night at a recent forum about witnessing a Parks and Recs employee running over 3 newly planted trees with their vehicle. And that person still has a job today, not in my administration, and everyone will know that. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh, on the issue of livability.
I spoke earlier of rebuilding each community. Well, my vision for each community is to have a fresh food economy. So that means that as we pull the concrete out and the bad houses down, we're going to build a grand green space. I want to have each community with a grand public greenhouse, barn with some small animal husbandry, filled with trees, with orchard trees. I also envision communities having not just a rec center building, but an individual kind of recreation. So we should have skateboard parks, roller skating parks, rock climbing parks, motocross park, different parks that will cause citizens to want to go from one community to another. I am also somebody that is adamant about not wanting global corporate factories in the city. It will totally devastate our environment. I am one that's going to rebuild a local economy with small business, regional business, manufacturing companies, owned and operated by people who live right here in the city. That will cut down on all of the environmental damages that will be coming if we don't change course. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. McKesson, on the issue of the environment.
So I'd encourage you to go to the website and see the full plan. What I'll say here is that there are a host of issues we need to talk about. I think about stormwater runoff, that we have to think about what's happening with the sewage and where the water goes and what that means. So much of that work is actually about public information campaigns. The second part that we can do around that is also honoring the EPA consent decree. The city is under consent decree with the EPA, and we are off track. We're not on track to meet the consent decree that we signed, but we can do some things structurally to make sure that we're back on track. When I think about the issue of parks and recs, I was a teacher. I worked in 3 public school systems, was a special assistant here in the Office of Human Capital with Baltimore City Public Schools. I'm keen to the idea of play and what public space means. There's a rapid decreasing of green space in the city and green tops, trees. We can do a tree planting strategy that actually doesn't need to cost the city money, but we can work with partners in a new way. There are so many institutions in the city that are already doing good work, like Parks and People, and we can think about how to scale up programs like that to make sure that the impact is greater. And then the last thing is like a low cost, high impact. We could do a citywide intramural league that leverages partners and private institutions around the city to think about how we encourage play differently that doesn't necessarily need to cost the city so much more, but incurring the cost of coaches, for instance, isn't necessarily a huge cost, and we've seen cities do that in a way that is not super costly at the city level, but has a wide impact in ways that are demonstrable.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on a livable Baltimore, so I'm going to jump around a little bit, but the first thing I want to say is we really have to wean ourselves off of burning trash for energy in our city. I think it's terrible that, you know, so many of our citizens are breathing terrible air because of, you know, these decisions that we've made. You know, number two, you know, when we look at rec centers, I think we can do a lot when it comes to investing in rec centers, especially, you know, in our poorest communities. Rec centers can help provide green space, but also we can do things that are new in the 21st century. Rec centers aren't just going to be basketball courts and swimming pools, but 3D printers and laser cutting and additive manufacturing technologies. These are the types of things that are going to be the vocations for the next century, and we can be preparing our kids in that way and creating a city that's a better place. You know, there are things like gun detection technologies where we can, you know, we can put sensors all throughout the city, and anytime a gun goes off, you know, a first responder gets a GPS location and an audio recording of that gunshot, and somebody goes and sees what's going on. What we've seen in other cities like New York, Chicago, DC, Oakland, is that when these technologies are in place, they see upwards of 49% reductions in gun incidences. In Baltimore, we decided not to do it because we said it cost too much. If we talk about food deserts, there are refrigeration technologies that are used in New York City that help eliminate food deserts by giving bodegas the ability to have produce and, you know, fresh produce and fruits and vegetables. In many of our neighborhoods, kids can't get anything except, you know, really, you know, sodas and candies. Let's do things like this that could make our city a better place. And the last piece, bike lanes make our city a safe place as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Embry, on the issue of the environment and livability.
Thank you. So Rec and Parks is a department that has been underfunded for decades. And it's really important that we see not the costs of maintaining and creating green space, but the opportunities. Because when we invest in our parks and our tributaries, we improve the quality of life and we also increase property values. And it's also important to look at the fact that disinvestment in rec centers has contributed to the lack of safety in our city. And in my public safety plan, which experts in the Sun have said is the best in the race, I talk specifically about effective interventions for kids so that we're keeping them out of the juvenile justice system, And the fact is, between 3 and 6 p.m. in the afternoon is when children are most likely to be the victims of crime or commit crimes. And so we have to, as a city, invest in after-school and out-of-school opportunities so that they are occupied during those hours and during the evenings and during the summers so that they are not being caught up in the system. And that's having effective rec centers and effective programs that keep kids safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of fairness, to make sure that the folks on this side of the stage have gotten as much time to speak as the folks on that side of the stage, I'd like to suggest that rather than have rebuttals to the questions of livability and the environment, that we switch to a final question, which will have to do with education. We'll give everybody a chance to speak on that, and then have a rebuttal, and then we'll move to our closing statement so that you'll also have an opportunity to mingle with some of the folks who've joined us here at the National Federation for the Blind. So, Mr. Stokes, if that's okay with you? Is that
sure,
all right?
yes, sir.
Is it acceptable to everybody? Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
The Baltimore City Public Schools consistently have some of the lowest graduation rates in the state of Maryland, falling nearly 20% behind the state average. What are your plans for the Baltimore City school system, and what role will you play in creating a better Baltimore school system, ensuring that all students receive a quality education?
Sure. I mentioned this earlier, obviously, that 89% of all our fourth grade students are below proficiency, and 88% of our eighth graders are. As the mayor of the city, I will take full responsibility and accountability for the Baltimore City Public Schools. This nonsense that mayors say that it's not their responsibility, it belongs to the state, is not the truth. The mayor is responsible for our children and their schools. The schools, might I say, the school system is the most racist institution in the city of Baltimore. It contributes more to the poverty and the missed appropriation of funds and the health deficiency of our young people than any other institution in the city of Baltimore. I would first of all move millions of dollars, but accountable, to the Baltimore City Public Schools. The city spends 11% of its budget on public schools. The rest of every other jurisdiction gives 35 to 65% of its budget to kids, to education. I would move the money so we're jumping in the first 4 years to a third of the budget goes to education. And I would be holding folk accountable to switching and turning that number around of 89% deficits to 89% proficiency within the first 2 years. Many schools can do it. We have the model. We don't have to reinvent it. I will do it.
Thank you. Mr. Cupid, what would you do to improve the city schools?
Well, we need to remember that the state do play a major role within our public school system. And I would definitely lobby to get that power back. With that being said, I've talked to many different nonprofit organizations that attempts to reach out to our young kids that's problematic. Kids that are tardy consistently, kids that are absent from school, and try to reach out to them to get them back on the right track. Our public schools really is not that difficult to fix. We just need someone that actually care to actually fix it. We have been better, but over the years we have gotten worse. And that's because of a lack of accountability and, well, let's put it straightforward. Leadership have failed us in educating our kids and ensuring that they have the educational skills that they need for the next part of their life. That also led to what happened in April 2015, all right? Kids not being where they're supposed to be. Kids not being able to get home. So my role is that I will actually be active in the public school system and exercising my power to their benefit, while I work with the state to ensure that our kids are getting the education and the skills that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pugh, what role would you play in the city schools?
Well, first of all, accountability and transparency is important. The buck should stop at the mayor's office. I did submit the legislation, testified on it today about bringing back accountability to the mayor's office. But let me just say this. Those of you who are aware, and I know that you know this, that learning actually begins in the womb. So the earliest we can start educating our children, the greater their opportunities are for them to move forward and be competitive in the classroom. So I'm doing some collaboration with the medical community so that when a woman becomes pregnant, that we give them the tools that they need that will help them to provide the education that's needed for their children at birth. Secondly, the expansion of Judy centers throughout the city, which begin educating our children at 6 weeks of age, I think are important. Universal pre-K is central if our children, again, are going to be able to compete in the classroom. And I think then making sure that we have, similar to the Baltimore Design School, School for the Arts, and some other schools, a board of directors for every school system that does not run the school system, but helps to infuse capital into those buildings so that every child has what they need and every teacher has the supplies that they need in order to educate our children and to allow them to be competitive.
Thank you, Ms. Pugh. Mr. Wilson, the schools.
Again, my name is Wilton Wilson. The schools are terrible. I mean, you go inside the schools, we need new schools. We need new classrooms. We need new buildings. We need to have good benefits for teachers to attract the best in this country. If you don't have good benefits, you won't get good teachers. You need to have these schools be safe. If your schools are safe, you will get good teachers. I don't hear anybody talking about that. I mean, the children are out of control. So the other thing is that we have to have small size classes. We have 30, 40 children in one class. There's no way you can learn like that. This is not college. I think we should have small class size, 15, 20 the max. And so, therefore, we're supposed to go in that direction. We should make sure that we bring back other subjects into school, like physical education. Why we don't bring back physical education? It's important. When we grew up and in school, we get that. Why these children can't get that too? So we robbed them of the things that benefited us. And now we are in a bind. So we need to make the benefit for teachers attractive, attract the best teachers, make the school safe, and we will on the right track.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. The mayor's role in the Baltimore City Schools.
The mayor of Baltimore City needs to take responsibility for the performance of the Baltimore City Public Schools. The most important thing I've done in the last 10 years was to create a true community school at Green Street Academy over at 125 North Hilton Parkway. I invite all of you to come over there. I am so proud of that school. We have 650 kids. We're going to go to 875 kids in the next 2 years. We have a 120-foot greenhouse, a tilapia farm in the basement of the kids, a basement of the school that the kids manage. Actually, last semester they grew rockfish because they got a better price per pound from Spike at Woodbury Kitchen from rockfish than tilapia. They learn science and math with the greenhouse, the tilapia farm, free-range chickens, and our school is powered by solar panels. Through a public-private partnership, we just put $20 million into the building that Elijah Cummings and William Donald Schaefer went to junior high in. And we have the highest percentage of special ed kids of any school in the city. We have a true community school. And while we're teaching our kids science and math and certifications in all those areas, we have to remember that my kids lost 4 dads since the beginning of the school year to gun-related violence. So we're going to create a community school model where the provision of mental health and traditional health are at the school level. As well as teaching kids science and math, we have to understand that we need to bring our faith-based institutions in and create a true community school model.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Ms. Dixon, the schools.
Thank you. Education is what drove me to become a public servant. And in doing that, I realized that one of the things that has to happen, and that's why I partnered with the University of Maryland School of Social Work, where we created Promise Heights, where we began to work with parents before that baby is born. And as a result, in Zone 17, where it used to have the highest rate of illnesses and babies being born unhealthy, now has one of the highest rate for babies being born healthy. But not only that, it's expanded into the schools in that district. And through that area, we created community schools, mental health services, not only for the children, but the families. I want to expand upon community schools. The school day needs to be longer. We're in a different day than it was when I used to go home for lunch because my mother was home during the day. We need to expand the day, have a longer school day, have tutorial programs after school. We have to have all the other activities that kids don't get access to during the school day. Is so important. And that's, as well as accountability with taking back the schools, because it has to stop at the mayor. The city we have to continue to grow the budget into public schools versus into public safety, because education is going to be the key to help Baltimore to really grow and expand and develop the many talents that we have of people in this city.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Let's have 30 seconds for Group 1 to respond on the issue of education. Mr. Mosby.
The City Hall and the mayor's second floor has to aggressively take control of the school system, and I say control not by ownership because that's just semantics, but by accountability. We have to push for, again, lead paint poisoning abatement and go after the manufacturers of lead paint poisoning. We know that directly impacts our children. We have to provide universal pre-K for our 4-year-olds through social impact bonds, but we also have to stop the school-to-prison pipeline by developing a school-to-workforce pipeline that's providing vocational access opportunities. We know that in Sparrows Point, they're going to have over 10,000 jobs over the next 5 to 7 years. What are we doing to provide a competitive advantage for our children?
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez, on the schools.
I would give every community the freedom to choose the type of school that they want. As far as I'm concerned, every school should be considered a charter school and have the opportunity to develop whatever curriculum they see is best for their kids. We need to stop telling our parents what's best for them and start listening to them when they tell us what they want. So if they want a STEM school, if they want a charter school, if they want a tilapia farm, if they want a dual language program, let the parents decide. Let's empower our neighborhoods to do for themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Walsh, what the capacity of the mayor is to affect the schools.
Well, first of all, I will take the corporate out of the schools. Schools aren't businesses, they're schools. And so I don't see the vocational tracking from K to high school. I'm for broad education. We have the ability to put rigor into schools. We'll make strong vocational high schools with good, well-funded shops and technical. Get them ready for the business world at that point. I'm about fighting for those federal funds that come to our schools. We haven't been getting them. I will make sure they come and are distributed equally. Thank you.
Mr. McKesson, on the schools.
So we should reconsider our relationship with the school system. I'm mindful that the school system is a $1 billion organization with 12,000 employees. The city of Baltimore is a 14,000 employee organization with $3 billion budget. So in terms of taking it over, it sounds really simple, but it is not, and we need to be mindful of that. In terms of 4 concrete things, community schools, a commitment to community schools, adult literacy. There is no adult literacy strategy in the city. I talked about home visits before as like an important step, that can get the 0 to 3. And pre-K, people talk about universal pre-K. The reality is a lot of our kids already are in pre-K. There's like 1,000 kid gap right now that we need to close.
Thank you, Mr. McKesson. Mr. Young, on the schools.
Some of the things I think are really important when we look at our teachers. We hire teachers and principals a week before the school year starts in the city of Baltimore. If we're starting them behind, we're going to start our kids behind. If we're not paying them their first paycheck on time, then if we're starting our teachers behind, then again, we're starting our students behind. Those things actually happen here. And, when I speak about universal pre-kindergarten, algebra by 7th grade, calculus by 11th, with the elimination of lead paint poisoning, if you hit those markers, a child literally can be anything that they want to be. That's going to be the #1 priority for me as mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Embry, on the schools.
Thank you. In 30 seconds, public schools. I also want to be held responsible for the schools and judged on their performance. That means a few things. It means, 1, being operationally involved at a senior level so that never again does our system miscount students or fail to pay teachers or have ghost teachers. It also means 3 things that the mayor can have a direct role in: attracting or retaining great principals and great teachers, which is really the key to success in our system. It's about building out community schools and building partnerships with resources across the city. And 3rd, it means aligning all of the capital money in the 21st century school building with all of the other resources of the city and neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give each of you no more than a minute to make a closing statement, and for this, we'll start on this end of the stage. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here tonight, and I'm running for mayor because I know what it takes to run the city. I know how to manage the city. I know how to lead. I know how to work with people in the communities in order to move the city forward. And I'm willing to step up and put every ounce of my energy into the city, because Baltimore's a great city, despite the way that the media portrays Baltimore. But we have to make sure that as we move forward, that we take the politics out of Baltimore city government, the politics out of what happens in our business community, and really collaborate together, and really mean and truly believe that if we have an agenda set, that we can work together, not based on personalities, but based on each of us taking on a responsibility to move Baltimore forward. And so I'm really encouraged, I'm excited. People have pushed me out there to run for mayor, and I'm doing that because of the greatness of the people in this great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Mr. Warnock.
This is the most important election of a generation. It will determine how we view each other, how we view the city, and frankly, how the world views us. Politics as usual, and the politicians that are still running for office have brought our city to spiritual and to financial bankruptcy. We're running a $75 million deficit and a $744 million projected deficit over the next 6 years. I'm in this race because city government has been inadequate on almost every level. But I'm also in this race because I rode into Baltimore in that pickup truck 30 years ago, and it's given me everything that I have. And I believe, like we're doing at Green Street, that we can create schools where kids graduate with certifications to get the job of their choice in a global economy. And that we can create jobs for people, like we have at my company and at the Center for Urban Families. We're going to write the greatest turnaround story in America in Baltimore together now.
Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you again for the opportunity to come to this forum. I'm asking for your vote because I know I can do things differently, and we need to take a new path. What I'm asking you, and you make your decision. Don't look at it as a person from a next country coming here as an immigrant. If I'm the most qualified one you think I am, then I'm the choice. It works, the way how things look right now, it boils down to trust and accountability. If you cannot trust someone, if they break your trust, how can you give them a chance again at this critical time? That is very important. So, on your final decision, please follow wiltonwilson.com and see what I'm doing and see what I'm about. And I'm asking for your vote one more time. And thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Pugh.
First, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to be with you all this evening. I'm running to be the next mayor of Baltimore because I'm excited about the future of our city. While we have some problems and we have some issues, as I recall, standing on the corners of North Avenue and Penn, my message never changed. While this city is not monolithic, we have some issues in our city, and we've got to deal with those issues. I believe that the best years of Baltimore are in front of us. I came to the city as a teenager to go to Morgan State University. I graduated with a master's degree in business. I worked in banking, I've worked in private industry, and I believe that my experience in private industry, my experience as a city legislator, and my experience as a state legislator, and everything that I've done to this point has prepared me to be the greatest mayor that this city has ever had. I will work 24/7 nonstop because I believe in the future of our young people, I believe in the future of our city, and I know that when we lift the least of us, we will lift all of us. And it is about inclusiveness and working together. Thank you for allowing me to join you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Pugh. Mr. Cupid.
Yeah, thanks for having me this evening. Of course, we will all like your vote. That's why we're here. Whatever you decide, you know I will stay committed. As you guys know, I'm a Baltimore police sergeant. I'm committed to continue to serve and to do my best to protect and serve in whatever capacity that I'm given. I'm running for mayor because, well, we could do better. And we have been going down the wrong road for too long. And while this is my first time running for any political office, I'm a kind of person that's kind of bold, right? There's no mountain too high for me to climb, no ocean too wide for me to cross. So I'm asking for your vote, for your support, and a big thank you to all those that found me on Twitter and sent out your condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cupid. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you all for allowing us to come before you this evening and to speak. You know, when I came back into council 5 years ago, amazingly, I came back as an insider, but I had to fight as if I were an outsider. I came into a situation where folks said, you know, we're going to close pools and rec centers, and I said, no, we're not. I said, we're going to figure this out. We're going to audit our books. We're going to make sure we were more efficient, and we kept most of those pools open and most of those rec centers open. I'm the guy who said we're not going to allow a handful of billionaire developers, 2 of them, 3 of them maybe, while everyone else paid their full share of taxes. We were going to take our tax dollars and allow them not to pay taxes for 30 years for their projects. I lost the first battle, but never again will this city see that, where we give hundreds of millions of dollars of our money while we pay our taxes and our high water bills. I beat them the second time on this matter, and I won't ignore the public safety issue. I'm sorry we didn't get to it tonight, but that's a big elephant. And we've got to talk about that.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Ms. Embry.
Thank you. Eleanor Roosevelt used to talk about leaders who light a candle instead of cursing the darkness. And we've had some dark times in Baltimore. We need to learn from them. But I want to focus on leading Baltimore to a brighter future. This is my city. It's where I grew up, and it's where I want to spend the rest of my life. And that's why I've spent my life and my career making the city better. And that's why what I want to continue to do as mayor. I want to cut the violence in the city and make us safe. I want to reform the police department so that everyone in the city is treated with respect. I want to reclaim our schools, and I want to make the city prosperous for everyone in the city. I'm a realist. I know that Baltimore faces some serious and entrenched challenges. But I also know that in our darkest times we come together. And it's why I believe we can do things differently. I believe we can have a safe city, we can grow our economy, we can reclaim our schools, and we can have an ethical and efficient government. And I believe it because I know the capacity of the city and its people. I'm excited to be your next mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Embry. Mr. Young.
Thank you again for your time. If you want to learn more about me, you can find out more at electcalvinyoung.com. I encourage you to sign up for email updates because this month we will be releasing our policy papers and positions for the campaign. My candidacy is funded not by corporate interests or big city donors. It's by people like ordinary folks like you guys. In this last week, we've had over 100 donations to my campaign because people aren't interested in what we've seen in the past. They're interested in a future for Baltimore that is brighter, that is wonderful. And I had a conversation with Governor Deval Patrick last month, the former governor of Massachusetts. He said sometimes we elect, cycle to cycle in these political games, but we need to start electing generational leaders. I'm hoping to be a generational leader for Baltimore, somebody that can be an example to the young men on our street corners who need to see somebody like me and see that they can be better, that they don't have to live on the streets, that they can be somebody great. And I hope to be the next mayor for Baltimore for exactly that reason. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. McKesson.
We have a choice in this election between the politics as usual or the politics of change. And we know what politics as usual gets us, and it's what got us here. And the politics of change will be the only thing that gets us out of this. When I think about the work that I've been engaged in the last 18 months and for my entire career, it's been about telling the truth in public, and the truth is that we have to do something different. The truth is that 344 murders means that we have a problem. The truth is that our schools aren't doing what they should be. The truth is that we have to think about issues like adult literacy and stormwater runoff and public health in new and innovative ways. If you go to the website, DerayForMayor.com, you'll see that I've launched a plan that crosses a host of issues from arts and culture to public health to safety and crime. I'm an activist, organizer, and educator who has a track record of leading with results, and I'm excited to do that here as the next mayor of Baltimore City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKesson. Ms. Walsh?
I always like to tell the audience that you might not know my name, but my organization has been working in communities across the city. I have a public policy blog that has been followed by thousands over the years. I'm well known, I'm well supported. You don't hear me in the media because I'm not an establishment pal. I'm against all of the establishment master plan. We have two choices. One Baltimore that looks like an international economic zone with global corporate campuses and foreign rich, or we have one Baltimore that is rebuilding the Baltimore we have for our own citizens with small businesses, small manufacturing, and getting all of our citizens to work, attracting new residents to the city. Cindy Walsh for mayor. Take a look at my campaign website. I have my policy issues. My professional background is the only one that allows such an administration of a major city. Check out my Facebook page for all of my policy stances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. Gutierrez.
Now more than ever, we need a mayor who can unite our city. And if you go to my Facebook page, Patrick Gutierrez for Mayor, you will see that I'm doing exactly that. All across this city, people are responding to my message that a better Baltimore begins with better day-to-day management of our people, our processes, and our money. Once we've established that foundation, then we can start to address all of these problems that we've talked about tonight. But it begins with an efficient, competent government. That's what I've done my entire career all across this country, including right here in Baltimore. And that's what I will do as your next mayor. Please visit abetterbaltimore.org to find out more about me and to hear my song. Yes, I have a song. And thank you very much for your time tonight, and please vote for me on April 26th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Mr. Mosby.
Statistically, I'm not supposed to be here. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be sitting on the stage running for mayor of Baltimore across from you. Growing up in Northeast Baltimore to a 3-bedroom house with 6 women, watching my mother struggle on a daily basis as I shared a bedroom with her to the 8th grade, get out of bed at 4:30 a.m. to catch 2 buses to work. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be here. Growing up with a mother that had to teach me how to ride a bike, how to catch a football, how to apply for college as the first person in my family to go away to college, I am not supposed to be here. But I am here, Baltimore, and the reason that I am here is to connect the dots. I am the only person on the stage that understands how to connect the dots from corporate America to our street corners, how to provide young folks from all across this city real exposure and opportunity to a better tomorrow. Baltimore City, we have an opportunity and a chance now to forever change the trajectory of this city, and I implore you, I ask you, go to my website, mosbyformayor.com, read my plan. Let's build a better Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. How about a hand for all of our candidates, ladies and gentlemen? We want to thank all of you for joining us here at the National Federation of the Blind. We want to thank everybody who's joined us online. Thanks very much to cityexplainer.com and southbaltimore.com for streaming this event tonight. Thanks to NFB for being such a gracious host, and thanks to the League of Women Voters, thanks to Linda Riddleman, thanks to all of the neighborhood associations and all the people who made this event possible. Thanks to each of our candidates. Let's all do what we can to assure that we have the biggest voter turnout in the history of the city on April 26th. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.